Okay, so immediately after I got done reading this week's chapter, I had to go back and actually reread the scene in the manga and rewatch it in the anime, because after we find out about Asta's demon in this week's chapter, it brings a whole new level of context to this scene and this dialogue that the AMD has between the other demon. And it actually kind of gives us a little bit of a hint to exactly what kind of character AMD might be once we get to know him a little bit more. And what I mean by that is going to actually make a lot more sense later on in the video. Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, so we got another great chapter of Black Clover out this week, chapter 243. So much hype about this chapter. You might actually even see me pick up my phone a lot to look through the chapter again, just because there's so much I actually want to talk about from this week's chapter and so much excitement from it, that in order to actually keep my brain on track about what I'm trying to talk about at the current moment, I might have to look at my phone again just to remind myself what it is I'm trying to talk about. But anyway, we get this week's chapter. It picks up immediately where the last one left off, and I actually kind of missed something in my last week's review when I was reading the last chapter. Apparently, when Asta activated his new, more advanced dark version, he attacked Dante with I want to say with one of his dark slashes. I didn't realize that when I was reading the last week's chapter, but Vanessa kind of mentions it in the beginning of this one and says because of that slash, he negated the gravity magic that Dante was using in order to basically hold the three of them against the Black Bull headquarters and keep that headquarters floating in the air. So they actually all come crashing down in the very beginning of the chapter. All three of them, Gouch, Vanessa, and Gray, and the Black Bull headquarters, minus the head, which has Henry in it, which I believe Dante actually sent flying about halfway through the last chapter after he activated his dark form. So we still don't know exactly when he's going to show back up in the fight. But anyway, like I said, the three of them come crashing down, which honestly can't be that good for Gouch, considering he still has that giant stone sword just straight through his chest. So he is pretty much bleeding out on the ground, crashing down onto the ground from, like, I want to say at the very least 20 feet in the air. That's definitely not good for his body in the current state he's in. He is very much definitely on death's door right now. And if they don't find a healer for him quick, he probably won't end up making it out of this alive. Now, immediately, pretty much as soon as we hit the second page, we go straight back into the fight for a majority of the chapter. And actually, as soon as we actually do hit the second page, the very first panel we get to see, because obviously you read chapters from left to right, the first panel we actually get to see on the page is kind of reminding us that Asta's not really fully in control of himself right now. He's more of like a crazed, like, animalistic state, which again, I gotta say, it reminds me a lot of early on Naruto, when Naruto really could not control the nine-tailed fox energy, and every time he would start to use it a little bit, he would go more and more crazy and more wild, to the point where he would eventually start attacking his own friends just because he got in his way, and just because he was so out of control that he didn't realize what he was doing. And that's basically the situation that Asta's in right now. The only difference is, in this chapter, we don't see Asta actually try to attack any of his friends. He's pretty much solely focused on attacking Dante. Now, even though Asta is actually in this more crazed out state, we do get to see him pull out a brand new move, or at least as far as I'm aware, a brand new move that we've never seen him use before. And that's basically he uses his Demon Slayer sword to create what at first I thought was just basically like a more twisty, more like snake-like version of his Dark Slash. But as we see later on in the chapter, the move that he's using is actually still attached to the Demon Slayer sword, so it's more like kind of like a whip. And it's not just a whip. It's not like just Asta's just flinging a sword around and using it to attack Dante. Seemingly, just based off the way we see him use it in the chapter, it seems like the whip is kind of more like the early version of Dark Meteorite, where it was basically how Dark Meteorite in the beginning was basically just like was like a magic-seeking missile. It seems like what this Dark Whip is kind of like as well. It seems like once Asta uses it and tries to attack Dante with it, it just kind of follows him or tries to attack him without Asta really doing much when it comes to movement. It seems like it does it on its own and just like seeks out his opponent. And it's actually kind of interesting because when you look at the way the attacks actually moving throughout the chapter and to see the way he's trying to seek out Dante and attack him, it almost kind of feels like it's actually alive, especially the way he's kind of slithering around the sky and going after him. So it's kind of like Asta modeled his new attack after a snake, which would actually make a lot of sense since he spent 6 months training in the Heart Kingdom, and considering they're all about nature and they actually reside in a forest, it would make sense that at some point Asta might have come across a snake, looked at it and was like, hey, you know what? That's kind of an interesting idea for an attack, the way it moved around. Kind of probably gained some kind of inspiration for this move by looking at snakes and other wildlife creatures, which would be interesting because we could actually possibly then see if he did go that route when it came to developing new moves. We could see other animals incorporated into his anti-magic attacks. Not exactly sure how he could do it, But it would be interesting to see exactly what Tabata comes up with if he decides to go down that route. Now, I mean, of course, even though Asa pulled out this brand new move, he's still not really landing a hit on Dante. And that's mostly because of the fact that we see Dante still using that same kind of like spatial field technique that he used in the last chapter. Which, by the way, in the last chapter, it seemed like the way Dante used it, at least, that it was kind of creating like a spatial field around him that just completely made him intangible to his opponent's attacks. But based off the way he used it in this chapter, it seemed more like that spatial field teleports him away and leaves that field around him, or leaves that field in a certain position that he was in order for his opponents to be tricked into attacking it instead of himself, wherever he appears. Which actually makes a lot more sense now when you think about what happened in the last chapter after he used it. He used it as his attack went right through it, and then he just out of nowhere appeared in front of Asta and caused him to crash onto the ground. So if we consider that this move actually teleports Dante instead of just makes him intangible, it would make a lot more sense how he was able to appear right in front of Asta that quickly. Now, while the two of them are fighting, we actually do get the scene where Dante goes into like his mental scape, I guess, and starts talking to his demon, which we end up finding out in the chapter is Lucifer, which of course makes a lot of sense, Dante being the king of the Spade Kingdom and the leader of the Dark Triad. Of course, he had to have the most important demon out of the three of them, and what's more important than the devil himself. Now, that being said, even though Lucifer is usually mostly known as the devil himself, in some mythologies there actually are multiple versions of the devil. Lucifer isn't just the only one. I believe Beelzebub is usually also referred to as the devil alongside Lucifer, and I believe there is one more. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but it'll be interesting to see exactly which way Tabata goes with this. Is it that Dante's demon, Lucifer, actually is the Devil King himself? Or are we going to end up finding out that he's just another high-ranking devil, and there's possibly at least two other people, like I said, Beelzebub, and whoever the third version of the devil usually is, that are also just as high-ranked as him when it comes to the demon world? Now, during their conversation, and I'm actually pretty sure this is the part of the chapter that most people are going to be focused on, and actually, when they talk about and discuss this chapter, and this is going to be the part they talk about the most. But when the two of them are talking, Dante asks Lucifer if he recognizes Asta's devil, and he tells him no, and says because of the fact that he uses anti-magic or uses an attack that depletes magical energy, that must mean that he comes from the lower class, inferior, mana-less demons. So yeah, the chapter actually confirms that Asta's demon, the AMD, is actually a very low-class demon, which has actually been a theory that I'm pretty sure most people have had about Asta's demon for a long time now throughout the series. I'm not sure if I'm trying to remember if it was ever confirmed prior to this, but I do remember people mentioning and commenting that they believe that Asta's demon is actually a low-class demon, and that's probably why the demon in the last arc didn't recognize him, because of the fact that he was so low-class that he wasn't aware of him. Oh, and speaking of the demon from the last arc, we actually get mention of what his name's going to be in the chapter. Now, in this translated version that we get, the fan translated one, they call him Gred, but they also put in the notes for the translation that this is a brand new word or brand new name that they weren't sure exactly how to translate. So we can't really take this name as being the actual name. We'll have to wait till Sunday when the actual chapter comes out in order to figure out exactly what Tabata wanted to name that demon. But yeah, we end up finding out that that demon is also actually a high-class demon. And this is why I said this scene actually brings a whole new context and a whole new level of understanding to Asta's demon. Because when we find out that Asta's demon is actually very low class, and the fact that, this demon, Gred, was a high-class demon, when you look at the dialogue between the two of them and what Asta's demon is actually saying to him, it kind of shows that there's a lot more animosity between the two of them than what was really put forward when we first got the scene. And because of the new understanding I get from AMD's dialogue in the scene, is making me start to think that his character is going to be something similar to Zora, or at least early on Zora, where we saw that Zora was very, very, very much against the nobles and royals, and pretty much hated anyone who wasn't a commoner. I kind of get the feeling that that's going to be kind of how AMD is going forward, especially when we get to see him interact with other high-class demons. And that could actually be a reason why he developed the anti-magic attacks that he has, because of the fact that he lacked mana and was probably looked down on by the higher class demons who were actually very rich and very plentiful with mana. He developed his own ability to deplete mana in order to be able to fight against them, and show them that they, no matter how strong and how important they think they are, he still, as a lower class demon, was able to defeat them. And you know what I actually just thought of this? This actually makes a lot more sense as to why he wants Asta's body, and why he actually hasn't been very, active in trying to really take it over at the same time. because he obviously wants Asta's body because demons gain their full powers and abilities when they have a physical body, which he obviously doesn't have right now. So that's the reason why he wants Asta's body himself, so he can actually use his full abilities to their fullest extent. But at the same time, because of the fact that Asta is using his abilities to defeat higher class demons, like he did with Gred in the last arc, he seems like he's more willing to, sit on the back burner and not try to take over Asta's body by force right away. Because I mean, even though he's not fighting them himself, his techniques are still being used to take down the higher class demons. Now, even though it's actually really cool finding out the fact that Dante's demon is Lucifer and getting this new information and this new kind of like understanding of AMD, honestly, to me, the best part of the chapter, and actually the part I'm actually looking forward to seeing how this pushes forward the most, was that scene where you take a step back and actually look at Vanessa, Gray, and Gouch in their situation, and seeing how emotional Gray gets and how useless she actually is in his current situation. And I guess that's really because of the fact that we can kind of all agree that out of all the Black Bolt characters, Gray's had the least amount of development throughout the series. Even, considering the fact that Henry and Zora were introduced way later than her, they still kind of had more character development done to them than she has had since her introduction. So it's high time for Tabata to, take some time and actually start to develop her character a little bit more. And I could basically see two routes that Tabata could take in order to develop her character or at least her abilities, that ultimately really, no matter which route he takes, kind of both end in the same conclusion. And that basically being either the first route, Gray uses some kind of new transformation ability where she transforms into a character, is actually able to use their healing magic in order to save Gouch, or someone else who actually has healing abilities comes to the battlefield and heals Gouch, and this actually leads Gray to, find new ways to use her transformation magic. And again, she basically uses her transformation magic to turn to someone and is actually able to use their abilities by transforming into them. Now, I mean, of course, if Tabata decides to go that route with developing Gray's powers, people are obviously going to compare her to Toga from My Hero Academia, because not that long ago in the manga, her quirk actually evolved to where now when she transforms into people, she can kind of briefly use their abilities. So of course, if he decides to go down that route, people are obviously going to say that he's basically copying Horikoshi's work. But when you think about Gray's abilities and the way her transformation magic actually works, being able to copy people's abilities when she transforms into them is kind of the natural progression for her techniques. So, I mean, yeah, it could be looked at as copying another mangaka's work, but at the same time, it's really the only route that there is to go with this character. Now, after that scene with Gray, we actually do cut back over to Dante and Asta's fight, and we see that Dante's actually starting to lose interest in Asta now that he knows that his demon is actually not high rank like him. So he's actually just planning on killing Asta and ending the fight right now. And when he actually goes to do it, Asta uses his, what was his move called? I believe it's called like his Black Tornado. He uses that in order to block the 3 like stone swords that Dante created to kill him. And then when he launches an attack at Dante uses a spatial move to basically teleport himself away. But in a surprising moment, Asta is actually able to predict where Dante's going to teleport to, and actually goes rushing at him and slashes him on the cheek, landing his first official blow against Dante throughout the entire fight. Which of course, obviously at the end of the chapter, we see that it pisses off Dante completely, which means Dante's probably going to power up to 70%, probably fully up to 80% in the next chapter. And even with the power up that Asta has right now and how well he's actually really doing against Dante, if Dante goes all out, it's not going to be a good start. It's not going to be a good fight for Asta. He's going to take the L. Unfortunately, he's going to lose this fight unless he gets some major backup. But that's not the important part. The important part is the fact that even though Asta's in this more crazed, more animalistic state, he still has some form of rational thought. Now, maybe it was just pure instinct that he was able to predict where Dante was going to teleport to, but I kind of got the implication that Asta was actually more rationally thinking and actually planning out his attacks in this moment. So maybe we're actually starting to see Asta gain more control over this new form, or maybe this is actually AMD slowly taking over Asta's body and actually using it to fight against Lucifer and Dante in order to kill them both. Now, before I end the video, I do want to mention that we actually do get 2 better shots of Asta's new advanced version of his dark form in this chapter. And what we can see from both shots is that basically, in addition to the wing, or the like partial wing that Asta's grown on his other side of his body, we also see that in addition to that, Asta has grown a tail. But anyway, guys, this is it for the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. comment down below with your thoughts and theories, and I'll catch you guys next week. Peace.